Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Garden Robinson, and I'm your host for today's Field to Fork webinar. These are brought to you by North Dakota State University Extension. This is the 11th year we've done the series, and we're really glad you joined us today. We have archived all of the webinars from the previous years, so there's more than 100, and the link is always on our Field to Fork webinar page. You also may download a certificate of attendance. We've had about 50,000 people view these live or recorded since we began this so many years ago. And today I offer a special welcome to all of our watch parties around North Dakota. The next slide shows our upcoming webinars. We hope that you join us for these as well. I will be your speaker next week, so I'll be changing spots with someone else. The next slide provides an acknowledgement. I have a very special request that I need from you. This program is sponsored in part with grant funding from the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service, and I will ask all of you to complete the very short online survey that will be emailed to you right after today's webinar. As a thank you, we are providing prizes to all the lucky winners of the random drawings, but please include your complete address on the follow-up form. That includes your city, state, and zip code, because we want the prize to reach you. After the summer session, we will send a follow-up survey to learn how you're doing with your gardening. And now I am very happy to introduce today's speaker, Cindy Brison. Cindy is an extension educator at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Her areas of expertise include food safety, Nebraska cottage foods, and health and wellness. She works with restaurant managers, childcare providers, and anyone who serves or prepares food for others. Today, she will be presenting on the topic of food-related emergencies and how to be prepared. So thanks for being here, Cindy, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to talk about this subject. It's something that in Nebraska is very near and dear to us because if you wait an hour, the weather changes and you never know what's going to happen. Here is our non-discrimination statement. And we'll get started. So how did this all come about? In Nebraska, we have storms just like everybody else does. This has been a week for storms across the United States, whether it be tornadoes, floods, avalanches, fires. We have a terrible fire that's in Texas and Oklahoma. And so all different sorts of disasters that happen. A lot of these disasters have led to people either having to evacuate or extended power outages. And so we service families who call us and say, what do I do when my power is out? What do I do with my food? How can I feed my family? What can we do? What can we keep? What can we get rid of? So what we did is we came up with a program called Lights Out Cooking. It started with Texas A&M, and we were allowed to adapt their cookbook that they created, and we created our own, but we want to help people be ready for disaster preparation. Make sure that you're ready no matter what happens. So the cookbook, like I said, came about from Texas A&M. They had written a cookbook called Dinner Tonight, and it was just an emergency preparedness cookbook, so people could pull it out after an event, after a flood, after a fire, after the power is out, and they would know, what can I do? How do I prepare for an emergency so I can better handle it? So we took that and we utilized that information and then added some more that's specific to Nebraska. So when we were researching what to do in case of disasters, which have worked for Extension so far for 30 years now, and we've seen a lot of disasters, a lot of snowstorms, a lot of tornadoes, floods, fires, all that. And what we have found and what research has proven is that people who are prepared for disasters do much better, even though they've been through a disaster, than the people who are not prepared. Things like having a flashlight, having an emergency plan, what to do if the power goes out. And knowing what to do is going to help you get through it better physically, emotionally, and sometimes financially. So for every dollar spent on helping people prepare for a disaster, it does save $13 in once it's over and with damages and things like that. So that's why we talk about this. It's something that affects everyone. So in the research that we did, we found out that people who fare the worst in any disaster are people who are elderly. Anybody, especially over the age of 60, they say the people who are more likely to die in a disaster would be somebody over the age of 60. But then it goes to women and small children and the elderly, especially homebound. So those are the people that fare the worst in any disaster. They experience higher mortality rates, slower recovery. It could be because they're at greater risk. They have limited mobility. Maybe they're in not a house that may be safe during a tornado or a flood, or it got blown away. And they might have fewer resources to survive or recover. So those are the people, excuse me, those are the people that we really want to help. So part of this is talking about creating your emergency preparedness kit. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat all of a sudden. So these are based on your needs of your household. So think about, excuse me, if you were in a snowstorm and you couldn't get out for 3 days, do you have 3 days worth of food in your house that you can eat without a stove, without electricity, without refrigeration? Do you have a pantry full of food that you could eat? It might not be, eau de cuisine, that's wonderful, but do you have canned tuna and canned chicken and things like that, and canned vegetables and fruit that you can eat where you can survive for 3 days until you're able to get out again? One of the other things we talk about is preparing go bags. These are things that can be used pretty much in any disaster. If you get, especially with these fires, you might get a 10-minute notice from the local sheriff saying, you need to get out of here. What's going to be in your go bag? Are you going to have your important papers? Are you going to have medicine that you might need? Are you going to have any sort of anything that you might want to take with you, maybe some granola bars? What about pets? If you grab your pets, do you have a little pet food in there? So each go bag, we talk about maybe preparing a go bag for each family member. And it's, again, just like your pantry, it's very specific to your household. In our household, I have tuna. I love canned tuna. I'd be okay for 3 days in my house. Nobody else in my family eats canned tuna, so I'm going to have to come up with other things to feed my family besides canned tuna. The cat and I will be very happy, and nobody else will. They'll just have to be hungry, I guess. So we talk about with your pantry, filling your pantry. It's not something you do. You run out today and buy $500 worth of groceries. It's not Y2K. You don't have to do that. But think about over time, building up 3 days worth of food in your pantry. Have some canned proteins, have tuna or chicken or beef or salmon or shrimp. Things like peanut butter, nuts in a can or nuts in a jar. Do you have canned fruits and vegetables, dried beans and pastas, rice, anything like that? Maybe some pasta sauce to go over the top of it. Do you have carbs like cereal and oatmeal and tortillas? You don't necessarily have to have bread. You can make a sandwich out of a tortilla. But these are things that you build up in your pantry over time, and you keep recirculating. Because if you just fill your pantry and you just leave it there, or some people fill containers with their 3-day food supply, you need to rotate that stock out so your food is not going to go bad. One of the things that we've just added to our program is you need to think about the health of the people in your home too. So if you're home for 3 days, do you have somebody who's a diabetic? What kind of foods do you have that can serve them? Just like if you have somebody who has an allergen or anything like that, it's very specialized to the people who live in the house. So this is a nice list of things that you could keep in your pantry that would sustain somebody who's a diabetic for 3 days too. And you'll notice a lot of it is pretty much the same things that we've talked about keeping in there. That anybody would have. Excuse me. There's a website, foodsafety.gov has a website about keeping food safe, and it has an entire like 4-page list of how long can you keep certain foods. You want to rotate your foods, regardless of how much food you have in your pantry. You want to look at that, at least every 3 to 6 months to see, is that can of green beans starting to get close to the expiration date, or oh, I didn't see this can got stuck to the back and I need to use it soon. You also want to make sure things like dried goods, flours, cornmeals, things like that, you're using that up, in a very quick period of time, at least every 6 months. Because if you start storing dry things like rice and flour and cornmeal, pantry pests are going to start to come out, and then you're going to have a whole nother problem. So it's always good to rotate through the stock in your pantry, keep it up to date, make a list. Today I might add an extra can of tuna. Next week I might add an extra can of chicken. So I have that 3-day supply. One of the things is your emergency kit. Something very, very basic. Do you have a flashlight? It doesn't matter whoever the audience is I'm talking to, whether it be a restaurant manager or a daycare provider or somebody at home. Do you have a flashlight? Does it work? Does it have batteries in it? Somebody in a presentation last week said you should check your batteries frequently because they do have a tendency to corrode and not work. It would be dreadful if the power went out and you pulled your flashlight out and the batteries didn't work and you didn't have any more batteries. Or maybe you have something that's very popular, a rechargeable lantern that's always plugged in. And as soon as the power goes out, you just unplug it and it's ready to go. And that's fine too. But again, making sure you have certain things like that. If in your to-go bag, you have important papers that you might need. Do you have a list of all the phone numbers of people you'd want to get a hold of if you have to leave your house? Do you have maybe a birth certificate or whatever else that you need, bank statements, things like that? Do you have a couple days meds you can hurry up and grab? Do you have things like if you need to start something in your grill or something in a fireplace, do you have matches? Are they in a safe container to keep them from getting wet? Do you have a battery operated radio? Right now, everybody says, well, I have a cell phone. Cell phones work. Well, during storms, cell phones go down, towers go down, and then how are you going to get your information to stay safe? In your to-go bag should be charging cords so you can charge those electronics. One of the things that we do in our house, that was something that somebody told me once, is if there is a thunderstorm watch or a potential for snow that's going to happen in the next 24 hours, we make sure all of our electronic devices are plugged in and charged. You never know when the power is going to go out. And, if your phone's half dead by the time the power goes out, it's not going to charge again. If you have battery chargers that recharge your cell phones and your tablets and your iPads, make sure those are plugged in too. So you are ready to go in case the power's out. Just recently in Mississippi, I've known of some friends who had their power out for 3 weeks or more. How dreadful is that? Where would you go to, after 24 hours, you'd have to go somewhere to charge these things. And then to have snacks and water. What can you survive on even for just a few hours if you have to go somewhere until you can get someplace safe? We talk about preparing, and so being prepared is good, but what happens about during and after? So during, we want to make sure that you know where your information is coming from. You have a flashlight, you have a battery operated radio, you know where to go someplace safe. But then what do you do afterwards? So after a fire or a flood, what do you do to recover? What do you, after the power goes out, what do you have to use immediately? What do you have to toss? One of the things that happened in a storm we had in 97 is that we had a large power outage. We had a huge storm. The power went out for, I don't know, in some aspects of our town, a couple of weeks. And so neighborhoods, the day of the power outage, were getting together later that night, and they were all pulling their food from their fridges and their freezers, and they pulled grills out to the middle of their street, and they had a big block party, and everybody got to eat everything, so the food didn't go to waste. So, what can you do? That's kind of an unusual thing. One of the things we talk about with the weather, especially in the Midwest. So, day before yesterday, and yesterday, I think the high was 20 and the low was below zero with a wind chill index. Last week it was 75 degrees. So, depending upon if the power goes out, your house might get really cold. Maybe your canned goods freeze. What do you do with frozen canned goods? You're going to look at them. If you left them in your car overnight and they froze, and you bring them in the next day and they're frozen and they're not swollen, they're not leaking, they're not rusted, they're not bulging, you can let them thaw in your refrigerator and then use them as soon as possible. Totally fine. If they've been frozen for a while, you might think about looking at, well, what about my seams on my cans? Are they going to be okay? If you open up anything that's been frozen and it doesn't look right, smell right, do not taste it. Just throw it out. A lot of times, if something hasn't been frozen and the can is swollen, there's probably botulism in it. Get rid of it. But again, if the seams are rusted or they burst or things are leaking, put them in a plastic bag and dispose of them in your trash. You don't want animals to get to it. You definitely don't want to feed it to your pet. What about canned goods that have been exposed to heat and sunlight? So I've told you to keep this, to get a 3-day supply of food. Well, some people put that into a container and they might put it in their garage. And sometimes our garages can get to be very warm. So if canned goods are exposed to heat over 100 degrees, it can cause spoilage pretty quickly. It can cause the cans to bulge. It can cause all different sorts of things to happen. So again, if you have anything that's bulging or rusting or leaking, throw it away. If it's been out in the heat for a while, let's say all summer long, if it's been in a tub in your garage, that your canned goods are going to lose their nutrients a lot faster. They're going to have a different texture to them, and they're not going to last as long. Even though the can says it's good until, for 2 years, it's not going to last that long. And again, if it's been in a hot storage area too long, you need to just throw it away. After a flood, pretty much all you can keep are canned goods. Anything with a screw on top, a snap lid, a pull top, or a crimped top, you need to get rid of them. There's a potential that flood water could have gotten inside of those containers, even though they're still sealed. So canned goods, pretty much all you can keep. Cardboard boxes with juice boxes, baby formula, anything that you canned at home in a jar needs to go, because if they've come in contact with flood water, they could be contaminated. They could be dangerous. If you do have canned goods that have been exposed to flood water, you can remove the can labels. You can wash them with hot soapy water. You can sanitize them, or they recommend you can boil them for 2 minutes. I would sanitize them, allow them to air dry, and then relabel the cans with a permanent marker so you know what's in there. It would be dreadful to open up what you think is a can of beans to make chili and find out it's a can of peaches. So, make sure that you're relabeling them. And then again, use those canned goods up as soon as possible. And never ever, if you have canned goods that you think are questionable, never donate them to a food pantry. That's not a safe thing to do. So you're in the middle of a disaster and your power is out. What do you do? What are your cooking options? So I have a 3-day food supply, but do I have a grill? Do I have a gas grill? Do I have a charcoal grill? Can I use that? Can I even get to it if there's too much snow? Do I have a generator that I can run my refrigerator and my freezer on, making sure that that generator is away from the house and you're using it safely? Do I have a flat top? Do I have a propane stove? Again, they would have to be used safely. You're not going to bring a grill or a hibachi inside your kitchen. Part of this cookbook was recipes that are made without power, 3 days worth of recipes. Many of them are from our nutrition education program. So that means that they're made with ingredients that most people have in their house, in their pantry. They're nutritious and they're easy to prepare. And then it gives you other ideas on how to put together things. There's also a resource about what to keep and what to toss. But again, that USDA site I mentioned before also tells you, what should I keep after so many hours in a power outage? So I want you to think about this for a minute. And if you want to put something in the chat, that would be great if a few of you would do that. So think about what's in your pantry right now. If you went home or you're home right now and you open up your pantry and you're going, I need to make a meal tonight. There's no power. What could I use? What would I make? How would I do it? Will I be able to have a fruit, a vegetable, and a protein and a carb? Can I pull out tortillas? What can I do? Are all the food groups there? Can I go outside and put it on my grill? Can I go outside and cook it in my fire pit with a grate over the top of it? Looking at your pantry, could you survive for 3 days with what's in there? And think about that, really opening it up and looking at it. Well, yeah, I've got a couple cans of this and some of that, but could you survive for 3 days? I have a child who is in college and I see what he orders once a week. And I know right now he has a pound of hamburger, he has chicken nuggets, a gallon of milk, and some taco seasoning. That's the entire contents of his refrigerator and his pantry. So that child will starve. You need to make sure that you have some canned goods to fall back on and some other things, because that hamburger and those chicken nuggets and that milk are only going to last so many hours. So what do you have that you could use? What are things that you could eat that your whole family could eat? Do you have enough to feed your whole family? Or if it's just one of you, do you have enough for one of you? So those are questions that you need to think about. And I was going to try to look in the chat. It said I would eat out of our fridge, so none of it would go bad. But you can only open up your fridge so often. But that's a good answer, because you want to use those things up first. Beans and canned fish, instant noodles, canned fruits and veggies. Yeah. One of the things I haven't mentioned is, if you have canned goods, do you have a can opener? That's a big one. We have an age group of people, or a generation right now, that doesn't know how to use a can opener. And it's not going to do you any good to have a whole pantry full of canned goods if you can't open them. So it's one of those things. I like canned beans, pickled cauliflower. Some of these things sound like a pretty good meal. Now, all 3 days, will it look that pretty? Probably not. But that's okay. Your whole point is just to give your family nourishment and to make sure that you're keeping them fed so you can stay alive till you get out. You have an old-fashioned can opener. I love that. Everybody should have an old-fashioned can opener. So let me do this. So when I was presenting this last week to a group of retired individuals, they had a lot of questions, and some of them were, well, I'm a caffeine addict, and if I don't have coffee in the morning, how can I have coffee in the morning if my coffee maker doesn't work or my Keurig doesn't work? And I don't recommend any of those. I'm not endorsing those products. I'm just using those as examples. Well, then I started doing a little research, and in our house, if there wasn't caffeine in the morning, it would get ugly. So my husband actually found this. The people that make tools with batteries attached to them, all of them, Makita, all those places, all those tool manufacturers make coffee makers that you can stick the battery from your drill in and make a cup of coffee, which I thought was really interesting. We have an old-fashioned coffee pot that you would put on top of your fire pit if you're camping, and we pull that out and put it on top of our grill so people can have coffee. But you can see these are all things that I found online on Amazon. Again, I don't endorse these. It's just to give examples. We talk about generators. So one of the things with a generator is most generators are gas powered. And if there's a power outage, and a huge power outage, then you can't go to the gas station, because if there's no power to pump the gas, you can't pump the gas to power your generator. So they make generators that you can plug into solar cells, and you can charge your generator with that. But again, you can see the prices vary a lot, and they are very, very expensive. One of the questions that came up was, I have arthritis, and using a regular can opener is very, very hard for me. So I didn't realize this. They make battery operated can openers, and I thought that was pretty cool. So you can purchase a battery operated can opener. Make sure you have batteries though, to be able to open up your cans if you have some arthritis or something like that that keeps you from opening it. So there are things out there that you can use during a power outage to help you along. So other things to think about besides your food in a power outage that's just as health related. Think about somebody who's on oxygen that's using an oxygen machine. Do you have canisters of oxygen you can flip to if the power goes out? Do you have backup batteries? What can you do? Think about all the people that are on CPAP machines. Those are powered by electricity. If you're out of electricity for 3 weeks, that could get to be pretty ugly. What happens if you have meds that have to be refrigerated? What happens if you have insulin? What happens if you have some of these GLP meds that have to be refrigerated? What about things like electric wheelchairs so people can get around? Or you're a person who has a chairlift in your home that gets you from one floor to the other. If there's no electricity, how are you going to move? How are you going to go from one floor to another? And any refrigerators and your freezers. And of course, your cell phones and your electronic devices. Refrigerators and freezers, a full freezer, a full chest freezer might last 24 hours or a little more. A freezer in your refrigerator is not going to last that long because it's smaller and it's going to thaw out faster. Food in your refrigerator itself, the USDA recommends it only lasts 4 hours. Not very long. And if you keep opening the door to the refrigerator or the freezer, it's not going to last that long. So you need to think about that. Can you hurry up and get some ice? What can you do? So this is the meat of how to prepare for an emergency. So you're good to go next time something happens. Whether it's a natural disaster, whatever, you want to be the person on the block who's prepared. So the first thing you need to think about is where do you live and what kind of emergencies do you plan for? I live in the tallest, and I don't know why I know this. I live in the tallest spot of Omaha, Nebraska. So floods probably not going to be an issue for me. Storms are, windstorms, straight winds, tornadoes, definitely going to be a problem. Could there be wildfires? Of course there could. So we plan for things like that. Do you have emergency contacts? If you have to leave your home, who are you going to call to say, hey, I have to go to another town, or I'm leaving to go here? So people know where you're at so they can get a hold of you. Do you have an evacuation route? We've had people in the local area where we live have to leave in a 10-minute notice because of flash flooding. Where are you going to go? You don't just get in your car and drive. You have to know, well, that road is flooded, so I would go here. Or where would I go? Do I go to am I listening to the radio? Would I go to a local shelter that's set up? Where would I go? So it's good to practice things like that and to plan ahead. When our kids were little, we practiced fire drills. It's like you all three go to the mailbox and you wait till either we get out there or the firemen get there. You don't leave that mailbox until an adult gets there. So, you practice things like that. So to this day, my kids are in their 20s. They know to go to the mailbox. So the definition for watches and warnings for storms have changed in the last year. They've come up with new terms and can be very confusing. And people don't always know what's the difference between a watch and a warning. How should I act? What should be going on? So I try to explain watches and warnings in very simple terms. So I explain a watch, so it could be a thunderstorm watch, a tornado watch, a flood watch, whatever, as you're making tacos. So if there's a watch, you are going to get all the ingredients together to make a taco. Doesn't mean you're going to have tacos, but it means if you want to, they're all there. It means that the conditions could be favorable for something to happen. Now, when a warning happens, it means you're making tacos. So here, now you have a tornado warning, you have a thunderstorm warning. So now you have all the ingredients to make it happen, but now you're going to make tacos. So when it's time to make tacos, that's when you have to react. If there's a thunderstorm warning, where are you? What are you going to do? What's your plan? One of the things when we were piloting this particular presentation is we have a lot of people who aren't from Nebraska. We have a lot of people who are newer to the United States. So one of the things that's confusing to people is all these sirens we have. We have fire trucks, we have ambulances, we have police cars, and then we have tornado sirens. In the state of Nebraska, they put on the news the other day that they've changed the way they do tornado sirens, that they turn on the tornado siren for 3 minutes during the beginning of a warning or straight line winds or something else that's bad. And then that's it. They play them for 3 minutes. So it's mostly to alert people who would be outside. But then if you don't understand what that sound is, you're not going to know what to do. So I have the sound. I'm going to play this for a minute. Not a minute. I'm going to play it for a short period of time. This is actually what a tornado or a storm warning sounds like. And I know all of you that live in the Midwest know exactly what that noise is. So one of the things we think about, so you're outside, you're volunteering at a garden, and you hear the tornado sirens go off. Okay, the first thing that you should do before you even got to that garden that day is what is the weather going to be like? Are they predicting a storm? Then I need to be very aware. Maybe I have a battery operated radio with me. I need to be aware of what could be happening. Do I have all the ingredients to make tacos, or are we getting close to making tacos? So you want to check the weather before you even leave the house. Keep your cell phone close by. What are you going to get a weather alert from? If the tornado sirens go off, how are you going to know where it is and what to do? Can you pick it up on your cell phone? Can you go to your car? Is there a building close by? Your best bet is to seek shelter. If you're out and about, you're probably not going to, depending upon what's going on, you're not going to hop in your car. Maybe there's a shelter close by that you can go to, an enclosed building, something like that, or not, or get in your car and make sure the windows are rolled up. If there's no shelter nearby, avoid tall objects, avoid metal, avoid trees, things like that. Open water that might flood during a quick storm and wash you away. Make sure that some people say, well, I'll go lie down in a ditch. Well, in a tornado situation, that might be a safe thing to do. But if there's a lot of rain, that could flash flood very quickly too. Some people think, well, I'll hide under, an overpass in a bridge. Well, that just becomes a wind tunnel during a tornado, and that can be very dangerous too. So you have to be very careful. One of the things I thought was super interesting is that if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't get anywhere and it's lightning, and as a parent of soccer kids, we had a lightning app on our phones, and every parent got the same warning that there was lightning within half an hour and the game was over. But they said if you're out in the middle of a field and you're in lightning and you can't get somewhere safe, to curl up in a ball as much as possible and put the bottoms of your feet together. Because if your feet are flat on the ground, then you could cause the lightning to actually, it's looking for a ground. So it will come through your feet onto the ground. But if your feet are together, you're not connecting to the ground with a flat surface and you're less likely to be hit. I thought that was really interesting. So if you're going to go out in a storm, maybe you bring your kit with you, your emergency kit with you. In your house, your emergency kit, if you live somewhere that you might be out of water for 3 days on some of our farms, many people have a well that's driven by electricity to pump that water. If there's no electricity, you can't pump that water. And if you don't have a generator attached to your well, what are you going to do for water for 3 days? Making sure you have some bottled water and you rotate that stock. Making sure you have your food and your flashlights. Maybe you have candles and matches. Simple things that you should have in your house anyway, Band-Aids and a first aid kit. Again, your important documents that you might need to take with you in a moment's notice in a zippered bag that's plastic, so they're not going to get wet if things get very wet. Any sort of personal hygiene or medical meds, things like that, you would need to take with you too. Being able to stay informed during an emergency, super important. When the a study came out after our last tornado in Omaha, was a big one. People were asked, how did you get your information? And people that were outside said they heard the sirens, but many people said they got it on their cell phone, they heard it from a local radio. There was quite a large percentage that said, my neighbor told me, or somebody called me. How are you going to get that information? That's something you need to be on top of. A lot of people say they got it from social media. They saw it on Facebook. I think making sure that you have some way to get that information quickly is super important. Things happen when you least expect them, and there's not any storms predicted. During our county fair last year, it was over 100 degrees, super hot. We had about 100 people in a metal building that we were judging county fair foods and all different sorts of plants and things like that. And guess what? It was so hot, the thing on the power pole exploded. So we were without electricity. So what did we do? Did we stop immediately? No, we were prepared. The year before we had a storm and we weren't prepared. This year we were. We had flashlights. We had a battery operated radio. We know who to call. Within about an hour and a half, 2 hours, the public people had come out and they put a new transformer on the pole and we had electricity again. But you can see people in the background using their phones. Well, your phone's going to die pretty quickly with that flashlight on, but we had big battery operated flashlights. So being prepared made even something we weren't prepared for much easier to deal with. Knowing where to evacuate again, knowing where to go, where's the nearest shelter. If you have elderly, maybe neighbors or a relative that lives close by, do you have time to help them out? Don't put yourself in danger's way to go help them out. Get a hold of them. What can you do for them? So getting your information, I always watched our local TV station to get our weather information, but when the electricity goes out, there is no TV. So then where are you going to get it? So I pop open my tablet and I turn on the TV station through that, or I listen to my radio, my battery operated radio, or, if I have to, with my cell phone. So where are you going to get that information? If you're new to a city, how do you know what radio station you should listen to? How do you know what TV station you should listen to? So those are all things that you need to find out pretty quickly. Making sure each family member in your house knows what to do. Make sure that children know how to call 911. Make sure that you have a backup location. In a lot of situations, in a lot of disasters, whether it be shootings or whatever, where do you reunite with your family? If you're, for example, when my children were small, they were in daycare and I got to daycare just as a terrible storm hit and all the power went off in the childcare. And I looked at the childcare providers and I said, okay, let's get out our flashlights and our radio. And they didn't have any flashlights and they didn't have a battery operated radio, but they got some the next day. But families knew that those children were safe in that childcare until their parents came to pick them up. So how do you know, where are you going to reunite with a family member if you have to leave home? One of the things we do when we talk to groups of people is we talk about, could you start a community emergency response team? And that could be something as simple as you and two neighbors watch out for each other. You can have drills, you can have workshops, you can bring in speakers if you have a larger group, but how are you going to help each other? Maybe one of your neighbors is an elderly person that is on oxygen. Could you pop over there during a power outage to make sure that their tanks are close by and they can be hooked up. So just emergency response team, just watching out for each other. This is a copy of the cookbook that we created. It's called Lights Out Cooking. It has all the information I've been talking about, how to prepare for an emergency, what to do during an emergency, what to do after a disaster has happened. It talks about making how to store water for 3 days for your family. It talks about how to set up a food pantry. I know a lot of people like to put together a 3-day supply or more, and they put it in sealed containers, and that's fine, but just make sure again that they're stored someplace safe. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, and rotate that stock. We talk about the cookbook. It talks about food prep, how to set up something so you can heat foods. One of the biggest problems we have, and we have had here in town, is that people are dragging in. It's cold, it's snowy, it's rainy, and people are dragging their grills and their generators and their hibachis into their house, into their garage, and people are blowing themselves up. And that's exactly what we don't want. We want you to be safe. We want you to use these things safe. So we talk about that in this cookbook. We talk about manual can openers. One of the biggest things you should have, regardless of whether you have electricity or not, is you make sure that you have a meat thermometer. How do you know your food is done? Wouldn't it be dreadful to be without power and to have a foodborne illness? I think that would just be very terrible. So, checking to make sure your food is done. The cookbook has some pretty simple recipes in it, and a lot of these recipes I'm sure you could come up with, on your own. One of them, peanut butter energy bites. So we have something called Older Nebraskans Day at our state fair every year, and last year we went out to Older Nebraskans Day. It's where people over the age of 65 get in free, and they came and they listened to us talk about preparing for an emergency, and we handed out some of these peanut butter energy bites. And they're just old-fashioned oats and peanut butter and some chia seeds, and if you can put some dried fruit in there and some peanut butter. And it's just one of those things you can mix up ahead of time and pop in the freezer. And you can pull out and eat as you want it. So, you can have them in your freezer all year long and use them. But when the power goes out, they're a protein, they're a carb, they have some fruit in them. There's something you can pull out in a pinch and you can use until you prepare something. We have buffalo chicken salad in there made with canned chicken. Really, really good. Pull out that celery and carrots from your refrigerator, make up a salad for you to have for a meal, or making salmon tacos or stir fry. Or if you're able to heat something up, heat up some water and make some oatmeal, adding a banana that you have sitting on your counter, or adding some canned fruit to it. So there are recipes in there like that. Another thing that we recommend you can make ahead of time and freeze and take out as you need it, whether it's a disaster or not, things like trail mixes, super simple to mix up and put in your freezer, and just take out a cup or two if you need a snack, and then just replenish it. Canned beans, canned vegetables, all these things are super, super easy to make. They're shelf stable. If you're allergic to peanut butter, then maybe you get some sunflower butter, maybe you get something else. But make sure it's pertinent. Don't buy things and your family doesn't like to eat them, because then you're never going to use them. So buy things that your family will eat. Something very simple besides a can opener to have. If the power's out, your dishwasher doesn't work. If you don't have any water, your dishwasher doesn't work, including your sink. So paper plates, plastic silverware, plastic cups are all things you should have a little stockpile of, just in case the power goes out, so you don't have to worry about washing dishes. You're going to use your fresh produce up before it's stored or before it spoils. So things in your fridge like your carrots and your celery. You're going to use, apples and bananas. Things that are shelf stable are going to last a little longer. When the power goes out, if you know it's going to be out for a while, if you're lucky enough to get some ice, get a cooler, put some ice in it, and then put your food in that. During our storm of 97, we had a huge snowstorm right before Halloween, and the power went out, and on one of our local TV stations said, if your power's out, you don't want to lose your food, stick it all in the snow. It'll be just fine. No, it wasn't just fine. That week in our office alone, we took 2,000 phone calls from people who were not very happy that a dog had done bad things to their food. A raccoon had gone through their food and eaten it. All different sorts of things. If you're going to put food outside, if it's really cold, that's fine. Put it in a cooler, put some ice in that cooler, you should be fine. Putting it directly in the snow contaminates it, for one. And two, When the sun comes up, it's going to heat it up and it's going to be way warmer. Even though the temperature says it's 25, it's going to be warmer than that. So keep it in a cooler. Prepare ahead of time. Fill a lot of, my mom taught me this when I was a kid. Take an old ice cream bucket, fill it up with water, put a lid on it, stick it in your chest freezer. When you need it, you can pull out ice in a heartbeat and put it in a cooler to keep your food cold. It also keeps your chest freezer cold longer. If you're cooking food, make sure again it reaches safe temperatures. So the whole part of the presentation is I want you to be prepared. I want you to be safe before, during, and after the disaster. And anything you can do today is going to make your life easier if something does happen. So, just rely on your family and your neighbors. And if you have prepared ahead of time, you will do so much better. If you're interested in our cookbook, we do have it online. You can download the cookbook, and the prices are there. The QR codes are there. You can download the cookbook in English or Spanish for $5 or both for $8. Or you can request a hard copy, and it's spiral bound, so it sits up. So that is something. And again, the recording will be saved, so you can go back and get the QR codes if you want later on. But know that there are so many things that you can do now to be prepared. So, Julie, I think we're at the point where we can stop sharing my screen. If you've had any questions, that we can probably take some questions.
Yes. First, I want to say we had 253 people on today. And it was great to see people from so many states. And the high temperature was in California. Imagine that, 72 and sunny. And the low temperature was in fertile Minnesota, close to my hometown at 7 degrees. So just for fun. A reminder that we do have a handout of Cindy's presentation with all our other webinar information. And Ada put that in the chat. If you ever forget Field to Fork, just Google NDSU Extension Field to Fork, and it'll pop up in a search. Comment to you, Cindy. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm working on setting up a resilience hub in the East Metro of the Twin Cities, and she leaves her name and number, so I will provide that to you.
Be happy to help.
And now I have a question. What would you do with dry beans if you don't have a way to cook them?
Well, that's a really good question. So dried beans, especially red kidney beans, are poisonous if you don't cook them, and if you don't cook them all the way. So I don't know that you could eat them without cooking them. You'd have to rehydrate them, and cooking them, you'd have to cook them. So my guess, you could cook them ahead of time and freeze them and pull them out and use them. And that would save you a lot of time in a time when maybe you're cutting down trees or you're shoveling or things like that. So you could cook them ahead of time, freeze them. You can safely can beans using National Center for Home Food Preservation or bulk canning recipes. So you have them in a jar on your counter or in your, on your shelf. Or again, canned beans, like buy canned beans from the store.
And someone heard you say that kidney beans can be poisonous if not cooked. Do you want to give any more information on that?
So they contain chemicals that once you cook them, they just dissolve, they go away. So with raw kidney beans, it's one of those things when we teach food safety, it's like, just make sure you're temping things out. You're cooking your kidney beans until they're soft and they're 145, to make sure that you've killed anything that's in there. So it's one of those. I always thought it was strange that raw kidney beans were poisonous, and I wondered how they found that out until our youngest started eating the dried kidney beans at the doctor's office out of the pen container one day, and I'm like, that's how they found out that raw kidney beans are poisonous. Of course, it would be my kid, so.
One thing I'll add to your comment about beans, we are a major bean grower in North Dakota, and we have a whole section on beans on the Field to Fork website, including a cookbook called Spillin' the Beans. So you seem to like cookbooks here, so you can download that one right there. Someone is asking for the QR codes again. Could you reshare your last screen?
Yes, I will bring it up because I was trying to just put the QR code in but it won't go into the chat. So I will just reshare it.
All right, and I'll find another question for you. Many of us have charcoal grills. Any tips for using those in these emergency times?
Um, making sure that again you're using it away from the house, that you're using it, share screen just went away. You're using it safely, not in the garage, that you put the fire out when you're done cooking. So nobody starts on fire, it doesn't start your house on fire later on. That can be a huge problem. So,
There we go.
making sure that you have charcoal, that you have matches to start it, that you have all of that. Or if you don't have charcoal and you have a charcoal grill, even if you have, some wood, some dry wood, you could probably start a small fire in your charcoal grill with some small wood. Again, safety, huge safety. And have in your house for any time of the year, make sure you have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors.
And there's the QR code. Someone just made a comment about having a generator if you're on oxygen during times of crisis like this. They brought out their generator and they advise anyone on oxygen to have one. So that's a good tip.
It is. My mom was on oxygen and we made sure she didn't have a generator, but we made sure she had oxygen tanks close by.
And several of you shared tips, and I'll just give some of those. For an emergency dinner, heat pressure canned soup in a pan on the grill, defrost bread and fruit from the freezer, or we also have canned pasta sauce and pasta in the pantry. So you're really showing us that you're very prepared. I'd eat out of our fridge so none of it goes bad, and have ice bottles filled with ice so we can keep coolers cold. And another one talked about being a canner. They have a pantry full that will carry a family of 5 for 6 months. And
Wow.
wow, I will add that we have one of our canning experts from the Midwest joining us, Karen, in a few weeks. So I hope that you pop in and join us for that one as well. Someone mentioned that solar lights from the garden fit perfectly in candle holders. So that's a great tip.
That is a good tip.
And let's see, there was another one here. One of our refrigerators has a small freezer filled with refreezer blocks or bricks that keep foods very cold longer than ice. So that's a very good tip as well. One thing I know is that blocks of ice do a better job than ice cubes, which makes sense. Someone just asked about people who are canning water in jars. Any reason to do that?
It's a water. You can treat water in a gallon in a plastic gallon jug. I know people are, watching out for plastics and microplastics, but as long as you're rotating your stock, you can treat a whole lot more water in a gallon jug and have it for people than canned water because that's the most you can can is a quart. And then you have to have all the space to store all that and the lids and the time, and you still have to rotate that through. Canned water doesn't last forever. So I'm not against canned water. I'm just saying it's a lot easier to do it you buy gallons of water and you do that.
Someone popped in with the canned waters for first aid purposes to cleanse wounds, so that certainly makes sense to me.
Makes sense.
Yep. Um, do I have any more questions, or are you going to let Cindy off the hook? Any
I'm
more?
taking notes. This is great. Thank you.
Can you save water in used milk jugs?
Sure. As long as you wash, rinse, and sanitize them, wash and clean them out, make sure that there's no bacteria in them. Sure. And then you have to treat it. And that you can find online if you don't buy the cookbook. You treat it with a certain amount, a couple drops of, I don't quote me on that. You treat it with a couple drops of bleach and it's shelf stable for X amount of time. But again, that's something that you can find very easily online.
Homes should also have at least one functioning fire extinguisher. Another tip.
That's excellent. Excellent. Well, and making sure, think about your pets. Okay. If you have fish, if the power goes out, how are you going to power that filter? Fish aren't going to last very long if their water's not filtered. If you have turtles or lizards or things like that, they require heat to stay alive. What are you going to do? In Florida, all those poor lizards are falling, they're freezing and falling from the trees. What are you going to do? So think about your pets too. Think about your children. Maybe their go bag has a second blankie in it and a second lovey. Maybe those are the kind of things you keep in your kids to go bag.
We have a couple more questions, and we wouldn't need to treat water that was stored in the bottles it came in, correct?
So like Dasani or a like bottled water like that, or gallons of water.
I think that's what it means.
Okay, so no, it would be okay, but I would watch the expiration dates on those to make sure because water can grow bacteria. So watch the expiration dates on those and make sure that you're rotating that out.
And someone brought up a very important tip. Cars should have a fire extinguisher too.
And a flashlight, yes, and a blanket. And you should have a survival kit in your. I have a blanket and a shovel and all those things. If you live in the Midwest in the winter, the trunk is full.
Cindy, do you have any more information about meds and storage of them?
So a lot of times, some of it depends on how you get your meds. Sometimes you get your meds where you can get a 90-day supply at a time. Maybe you keep a 7-day supply in one of those little pill containers and you keep it in your to-go bag and then you rotate it out. So I just, I filled my pill container today. In a month, I'll take that pill container out. I'll use those meds and I'll refill it with fresh meds. Just keeping things like that. One of the things that I read, and I thought this was really interesting, is that things like insulin and the weight loss drugs need to be refrigerated, but once they open, they'll actually survive on your counter, some of them for 45 days. So check with the kind of drugs you have. I know there are certain antibiotics for kids that you have to keep refrigerated. It doesn't mean they'll go bad necessarily. You can talk to your pharmacist when you get it. It just means it might not last as long. So make sure you know what kind of drugs you take. Another thing I would recommend, so you have to leave and you don't have your drugs, I would keep a picture if you have a cell phone. And this is if you go on a cruise too. Keep a picture of your drugs, your drug bottle with your number on it and what it is and what the amount is. It's 10 milligrams of a cholesterol drug. Okay, have that because if in case you is in an emergency, you can go to a pharmacy and have your doctor refill them for you. But if you have all those pictures of the meds you're taking, it's going to be a whole lot easier to say, hey, this I'm taking this, this, and this. So it would be a lot easier to refill them.
Excellent tip. I'll just a couple more things and I'll bring us to a close for today. Bakery departments in many supermarkets will sell you their used food grade buckets. Maybe frosting was in it for $1 or $2. So that's a good tip for a food grade plastic. And then someone says, and this will be our last point, you said that screw top lids have to be thrown out if exposed to flood water. Does that include plastic bottled water and pop cans?
Yes. Yes, because you don't know if it's gotten in under the seal.
All right. Well, that will bring us to a close. And thank you so much, Cindy. I think we all learned a lot and we're all inspired to go and make sure we have that 3-day supply of foods. So thanks again, and I hope to see a lot of you next week.